welcome to our class on trees. My name is Doug Arthur, and this is the first time I've ever done a class here at Waters. What we're going to do today is talk about trees in general. The name of the class is Top 10 Trees. I think we have 11 here just for good measure. But of course, these are just a few trees that we've selected here, the staff. We have many more all over the place, and just this last week we got a supply of other trees as well. So after the class, we'll have folks can help you look around and select a tree, take a look at them, talk about them. We'll talk about some of these. You can come up and touch and feel them. As promised, everyone who comes to this class gets one of these Waters planting guides. Let's talk about that a little bit before we get into the trees. So like many jobs, preparation is really important. So when you go, say you select a tree and you pick one out and you're ready to go, when you plant the tree in the ground, you want the hole to be just the depth of the pot. It doesn't have to be really deep, but it needs to be about 3 times as wide. Now, for some of these big trees here, I'm not sure I'd try and tackle some of those. So it's the delivery and planting service is something that we offer, but for some of the smaller ones, this one is something that you could most likely handle yourself. We recommend that after you've dug this big hole and before you do anything else, you fill it with water and just see what happens. And if after 12 hours there's still water in there, you don't want to plant there. That means that there's not good drainage in that spot, and you really ought to consider another spot. Now recently a gentleman was in here and he told me he went through that exercise. 2 days later there was still water in that hole, and he thought maybe he would just get some trout and stock it and turn it into a fishing hole. I hope you don't have that experience, but it can happen. But let's say the water drains before you get back there. You know you've got a good spot. And there are certain other things that you want to do. One of them is you want to mix the soil with our premium mulch, maybe about 2 parts native soil, 1 part mulch. You want to sprinkle in Waters all-purpose fertilizer, and these Aqua Boost crystals are actually contain polymers. They help to retain moisture in the ground. These are all things that we recommend. There is another product called Root and Grow, which after you've sprinkled in the fertilizer, you can just water this in, and it helps stimulate the roots. A lot of people wonder, and they ask every day that we're here, is this a good time to plant? A good time of year? And actually, it's really the best time of year to plant for a number of reasons. One of them is that we don't have hot, dry spring winds, we don't have the summer heat wave, we don't have the monsoons, but we still have relatively mild, warm temperatures. The ground is nice and warm. It may be a little bit moist from the monsoons. And the idea is you want these trees to get a good start, to get the roots expand, get established, kind of hibernate over the winter. Springtime comes, they'll be up and running and ready to go. So the other thing is watering. Of course, new trees need a fair amount of water. You want to water regularly, maybe twice a week, until wintertime comes. And most of us, if you've got a drip system of some kind, you're likely to turn off the water so that the pipes don't freeze, that sort of thing. But it's important to maintain adequate watering during the winter, especially if we have a dry spell, mild weather. If we have storms, rain, and snow, you're probably okay. But if there's a dry spell, you want to be out there once or twice a month watering. I figure during the dry winter, 1 weekend, a month or 2 perhaps, I'll just be out there with a hose. I don't feel like turning the system on all over again, although you can certainly do that. And I'm just going to dedicate an hour to watering everything. You don't want these trees to dry out over the winter, especially the new ones. So those are all important things to remember to get the trees off to a good start. Of course, what we have here is evergreens and deciduous trees. So we'll talk a little bit about all of those and some of their characteristics. These are kind of the guidelines and things that you want to remember when you're planting. So just make sure that you have adequate water, good sized hole. If it's a little too big, we have a planting crew that can help you with that. If you have questions anytime, just stop me and we'll try and answer them for you.
I actually have a question. You said that if the water doesn't drain, is there something you can do, like put rocks dig the hole deeper and put rocks in there to promote drainage?
The question was, back to the hole that you've dug in the ground, if the water hasn't drained, what can you do about it? Well, our crew, in their truck they have a jackhammer, and they use it quite often. It's in the truck all the time. I'm not suggesting you want to go that far, but if you have like a hard pan rock, you might consider breaking up the rock. It's not fun, but you might be able to get some chunks out of there. The other thing that you could possibly do is maybe add some more mulch, perhaps. And try that. Remove rocks, debris, add mulch. See if the draining is going to work better. Because it's true. Sometimes you've got limited places in your yard where you want to plant. This is the ideal spot, near the house, the turn in the driveway, etc. If there are solutions, it just means a little more work to get that done, which at times I've had that experience in my yard. I think, oh great, I've got these irises, are going to go right here, and I start digging, and boom, what do I hit? A big rock, and I just say, okay, that's it. I'd rather look for another place, but that is an option. Any other questions about planting? Okay, so we talked about the products. We talked about the process of planting. I thought maybe we would just look at these trees and talk about them, and feel free after the class to come and look at them. A lot of times we depend on these tags to tell us about how high is it going to get, what color are the leaves in the fall. Everything we need to know, is it sun or shade. Most of the trees here are going to be full sun trees. And here's one. We'll start with the little one. This is a dwarf Alberta spruce. Isn't it nice? It's so cute. I can just hold it right here. It's one of the most least maintenance type trees you could plant. I have a couple of these, and they don't do much of anything. I don't do much of anything with them. They're bigger now, but they have that kind of stately evergreen sort of look, which I think is nice. And you don't have to do much of anything. Occasionally, they'll get some spiders, some webs, and sometimes you'll see some brown growth during the summertime. So I have this really complicated technique as I put my gardening gloves on, and I just sort of fluff them up, and the brown needles all fly away and the new green growth comes back. So that's a pretty easy tree to take care of. Dwarf Alberta spruce.
Where can it be planted?
It can be planted, you can put it in a pot if you like, a raised bed, in the ground, wherever you like. Some people like to take one, put it in a beautiful pot like right by the front door, because it's not going to get big, it's not going to drop any leaves, obviously it's an evergreen. And it's something that can just kind of be there, stately, sort of conservative, low maintenance. You can go away and...
Sun, shade?
Yeah, full sun. It's full sun, yeah.
How about the root system on that? How, like if you wanted to plant it just off of your walkway, on the front porch, where would you, do they grow straight down, or are they out? Is it going to pop the sidewalk? Or?
So the question is about the root system for the Alberta spruce. And for the most part, I don't think it's something that has an invasive root system. It could be fairly close. Because it's a dwarf, it's a very slow growing tree, it's not going to have a major invasive root system. So you don't have to worry about that. Yes, ma'am.
And what would be the maximum growth that you're looking at? And I suppose different if it's in a pot as opposed to ground.
Yes. So the maximum growth, the question is about how big are they going to get. We have some over here that are maybe 6 feet tall, and 6 to 8 feet is probably about the maximum height it's going to get. The couple that I have growing in my yard, they're only about this tall. They're kind of wide at the bottom, so they've sort of spread out. But they certainly haven't taken over the yard, and they're not reaching up for the sky by any means. This is probably the smallest, least amount of maintenance that you could imagine. Okay, so now, here's another one of my favorites, the autumn blaze maple. And you can see leaves are already starting to change. In the next couple of weeks, you'll just have this beautiful profusion of orangish red leaves. Then they all fall on the ground and I get to rake them up. But it is quite a show.
Good for your compost.
Yeah, it's great to compost them. These trees can get to be about 40 feet tall. They're wonderful shade trees. They have a nice rounded canopy. These leaves, unlike some maple trees, are very hardy for the winds that we get. We oftentimes in the springtime have trees that not only get wind blown, they get knocked over, and the leaves sort of get shredded. And so people come in and they'll think, oh, my tree's dying, what's going on? It's just kind of wind damage. That's a wonderful specimen, this autumn blaze maple. Let's talk about another one. You can follow me. See this mimosa? There's something about this that gets me. This is not something that you're going to plant near the national forest and compete with ponderosa pines. This is kind of a small tree.
Let me see if I can adjust.
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. You get this little canopy. You get these beautiful flowers. It's something really unique. This would be a good patio tree, not something to put out in the middle of your big 2-acre lot, because it's not going to get very big. But it's delicate, it's unusual looking, it's really nice.
What's the name of it?
Mimosa tree. Chocolate mimosa. It actually produces candy bars. They're not wrapped properly like a
Why doesn't it produce mimosas?
It's a mimosa candy, a very special kind of candy. Chocolate. Yeah.
And so is it that color or is that color because it's fall? No, it comes that color.
Yeah, it's actually a chocolate mimosa. Yeah,
As
yeah.
opposed
To the green one, yeah. There are a couple of varieties. This is all that we happen to have right now is a chocolate mimosa. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you can see this. Next tree, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I have a mimosa bush and it grows huge, but I can't get it to bloom. And I put the phosphate or whatever it is on it, but how do I do that to get it there?
Well, the question is about, she has a mimosa tree and it's not blooming. So what do we do about it? Have you fed it fertilizer?
No, I just did the phosphate.
Okay.
Like I said, it's huge, it just won't.
Yeah. Is it in a full sun spot? Is it getting enough water? These are the questions we ask every time someone comes in to try and diagnose a problem about what's happening. Why is it not growing? Why is it not flowering? I think it sounds like you've got adequate water, and phosphate's a great idea, but the all-purpose fertilizer, which you can, by the way, put on everything in your entire yard, is probably something that would help it to flower. That's what I would recommend. And that's usually the first step. We ask about watering and fertilizing. People can come back in a couple weeks after you modify those, if they do need to be modified.
Do those produce a pod?
No, they don't. They do not produce a pod. The question was about pods. Now, most of the trees that we bring in here, I mean, some of them have varieties that have pods, and we try and bring in only trees that do not have pods. Most people don't want a tree that's a messy tree, obviously, and so some can be that way. You know, some can dump fruit, some can have pods and other things that there's just extra work in the yard. So most everything we carry is without pods. Just another question, another topic, you might say, about, we don't have any junipers in here, but I just wanted to talk briefly about junipers because some folks come in here and they'll say, I'm allergic to juniper. I'm not going to buy any of these junipers that you have here. Well, the fact of the matter is the junipers that we have are not going to cause any problems with your allergies. Those junipers are the ones that you find on an empty lot in a national forest, the big alligator junipers. Those are the ones all around us, and there are millions of them, that create allergies. So if you really like juniper, and we have many varieties here, you don't have to worry about allergic reaction with the ones that you grow in your yard. If you go out in the national forest and go hiking, you're on your own. Take your Allegro with you is what I would suggest. Now, I don't know if you can see this too well. This just arrived recently and it's really too heavy to move, but this is a blue spruce. Lots of folks will come in here and say, I want this in my yard and I want to be able to put decorations, Christmas decorations on this tree. And it's really well suited for that. It has this blue-gray color, very hardy. It's going to grow to maybe 15 or 20 feet, but it expands more in the bottom than it does in height. But it's a beautiful tree. It's kind of a classic pine tree. Makes everybody think about Christmas, that sort of thing. Here we have a flowering pear tree. This has several characteristics that I think are outstanding. First of all, it's just a wonderful shade tree. It has a thick canopy. It's very dense. In the springtime, it puts out beautiful white flowers when most of the other trees are still just thinking about putting out buds. So the rest of your yard, at least your deciduous trees, may be kind of bare looking. This has got white flowers, just beautiful. And then shortly after that, it comes out with these dense green leaves. So you get this as a shade tree. It starts out early in the season. And then it really is probably the last tree in the fall to lose its leaves. It has beautiful orange, red color. But I have a couple of these in my yard and it was November before they lost their leaves. All the other trees were done. The maples, the ash, done in terms of getting rid of all the leaves. This was still growing. So flowering pear tree. There's some that are kind of short bushy with sort of oval shape. There are taller varieties as well. But it's a wonderful shade tree. It does well around here. By the way, most everything that we bring into the garden center is designed to succeed in our climate. We don't like to have anybody come back and say my tree died. And so that's why we don't sell mango trees to people, right? We don't live in the tropics, obviously. Another one of my favorites is this desert willow. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No fruit?
No.
Doesn't drop any fruit?
No fruit. Everything here, every deciduous tree here is ornamental, so there's no fruit. We do sell fruit trees. We don't have too many left over there. We just didn't choose to talk about those today. So, yeah, flowering pear. Anytime we say flowering, it means no fruit.
What's the height of that?
This can get to be, the height on this flowering pear tree, probably about 20, 25 feet. There are taller, thinner varieties, and we'll get them to be a little bit taller. But this particular kind, like the one that I have, is maybe up to the second story window almost, and really nice, thick, oval-shaped canopy. Great for blocking out the sunshine. So, how about this desert willow? How many trees do you see around here that flower from about April to August? Most trees, they flower in the spring for a short, beautiful period of time. This flowers all summer long. The other thing I like about it is it just kind of has that desert southwest look. And it's not real big, it's to be about 15 feet tall. It's very drought hardy, something that it's going to have these flowers all year. And it's actually in this category that we sometimes describe as semi-evergreen. If we have a mild winter, it may hang on to some of its leaves. If we have a lot of heavy storms and cold weather, it may lose it. But desert willow, really one of my favorites.
How would that go on a patio or a courtyard?
It would go, she was asking about how that would go on a patio or a courtyard. It would go well. In fact, down there we have some smaller varieties. So this to me is kind of like a small bush, large shrub. And you can pick out the shape. See how that has a trunk? Well,
Right.
Some of them are really more in a shrub type shape, and you can pick that out. That would really do well in a pot in a patio.
Yeah, how about a birch tree? We've seen so many birch trees that some look really good, some look like they're really having a struggle.
Well, I think the question is about birch trees. Are they going to do well here? And we probably ought to have the same notes that Michelle just mentioned, right? A birch tree is going to do better, and maybe it's 5,000 feet or above. If you're in a hot, dry, low altitude area, they might not do as well. But we have some nice specimens over there, and they have the white bark, it's peeling off, and so in the right setting, I think they should do really well. pros and cons of topping off a tree to manage growth and make it look better. I think it works well for most trees. Probably not so much so for the evergreens, just because sometimes it just sort of looks like you hacked them, so to speak. But I think judicious pruning to encourage growth in a certain way is always a good idea. The aspens, for example, in my backyard, I wanted them to grow and be bushy and wide, and they block the view of the neighbor's house, and rather than tall. And they're getting a little bit tall because they're almost 9 years old now. But I'm going to top those off, no problem. And certainly, any deciduous tree, you could prune that anytime you see fit. Most springtime, I'll cut down lower branches just because I don't feel like having to duck under them. And trees probably, in the first few years that you have them, they don't require a whole lot of pruning. But it's really the kind of general rule: if there's a broken branch, or some that are crossing each other, or some that are in the way, or some that you just don't like, feel free to prune them. And you're asking about pruning to encourage a certain shape, and yes, that can certainly be done. It's always a good idea. Okay, any other questions?
What about like the apple trees and the cherry trees you have over there? Is this also a good time to plant those type of trees there also?
Yes, it is. So the question is, this is a good time to plant fruit trees as well as the ones that we've got here? And the answer is yes. Same concepts apply about getting them started. And you'll have a head start. Maybe next spring you'll have some fruit. But all the fruit trees, they're going to do well in cold weather. They like a cold snap. They need a certain number of hours of cold weather for them to produce properly. And I think that if you found the tree that you like over there, it would be a good time to plant it rather than waiting until the springtime. Now in the springtime, we're going to have a lot more trees. So if you don't find what you like today, you can always hold out. But if you find something that you like this fall, this is a good time to plant it. I think in the springtime, last spring we received, something like 2,000 trees. It was a huge selection. But we still have a pretty good supply right now. Mm-hmm. And even for a lot of the deciduous trees, you can get some idea of what they're going to look like, what the leaves look like at this point, because they're already starting to turn like the maple tree. Any other questions? I don't know if everybody heard that question, but she has a fruit. She's moved into a lot that was neglected. She has a fruit tree that was very productive this last summer, and this was true for many people who had a really good year with their fruit trees. And so the question now is winter care. Strip the apples off the tree, I would say yes. Also consider pruning after all the leaves have fallen and the apples have come off. Take a look at that tree. What kind of a shape does it have? If it's been neglected, is it something that you want to shape to a different shape? Some people like to keep their fruit trees low, so it's easier to reach than to get up on a huge ladder to reach the fruit. One of the things that happened to some folks last summer is their apple trees or other fruit trees had so much fruit that branches would break. A neighbor of mine actually lost his tree. It had an apple tree for 20 years. It had so much fruit that one day it just cracked and fell over and it was gone. And so they picked up all kinds of apples and had the tree company come out and grind up everything. And even those guys were throwing apples in there. Of course, in his situation, it was tough to, when a tree is 20 years old, it has some really high branches, but maintenance of fruit trees in the summertime, in the fall, is important. And since your lot has been kind of neglected, you want to make sure that you've got a winter feeding of the all-purpose fertilizer. Winter feeding is probably the most important one that you'll do all year, and you can do it in November. And because this is a slow release organic fertilizer, it'll be there in the springtime when the trees and shrubs are ready to feed, ready to get started. So you don't want to wait until springtime. You want to do that right now. So that's what you could do for your winter care of the tree.
That same tree she's talking about in half of it lost its probably half dead.
Before we got
And
it.
it didn't have any bark on half of the trunk and all the limbs. We trimmed all that back last week. We need to paint that with some kind of tree paint. Just leave it there.
Okay. So the question is, when you have a major pruning, as in their case, part of the tree was dead and they cut off a big chunk of it, the question is, what do you do about that? We have that white spray paint that we would have it in cans. We can put it on with a brush. It is a good idea if you've got a big pruning in a bare spot, because bugs can get in there and attack the tree. So we do have a little spray can that you can just spray on the trees, and it's probably a good idea for pruning or cutting that is that major.
For the ends also, where we trimmed it, paint that.
That's probably less important, you know. I mean, you want to make a cut that's diagonal so the rain drains off it and that sort of thing. I mean, you can hit those, but just a branch cutting is probably not as important as a bare bark near the bottom of the tree or wherever it might be.
What do you do about an apple tree that produces a whole bunch of little tiny apples clustered together and they fall off before they get ripe? Can you do something to make it produce fewer bigger ones?
Good question. This question is about an apple tree that produces clusters of little apples, and then none of them really get to be very big, and some fall off. What you do in the springtime is you thin those out. You go in there and decide which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to take. And you could thin out as much as 50% of those. You want to give them some space. If you see a branch that's kind of sagging, that means it can't handle the weight. It's only going to get worse as the apples get bigger. So feel free to prune or thin out as much as 50%. This my neighbor that I was telling you about, if he'd been able to thin his tree, might not have lost that big apple tree. And just in his case, there were just so many apples, the tree couldn't handle the weight. And that could happen to you. It could happen next spring and summer. So feel free to just take those off and just leave a few good ones in there. Those are the ones that you're going to pick and enjoy.
So they'll get bigger.
They'll get bigger, yeah. They're never going to get really big if they're all clumped together. You'll just have a bunch of little apples, and they may not, grow that well. They may not fruit properly, that kind of thing. That's a good question. Okay, so the question is about a tree that had a major branch removed and what to do about that so that it doesn't get attacked with bugs. In general, trees can get bark beetles, bugs, just like roses and flowers. We have products we can help you with downstairs. One of them is called Plant Protector, and this is something that you can mix and water into the ground, and it will help with that sort of thing. And also, you don't have to do it very often either. It's something that can help you with all kinds of bugs that might attack your tree. And this goes back to that big branch that was cut. When you have a branch broken off or something's happened, major pruning, that tree can be somewhat exposed to bugs that are going to be detrimental to the tree.
Because it's weeping, can I still spray stuff on, or is it best just to leave it now that
It's been a while.
yeah?
You can still add a little spray to make sure it looks okay. Any other questions? Yes.
We live way up in the North Valley, north end of Baldwin, Feather Mountain area. We had a huge microburst hit the ground like a mini tornado. Took out our neighbor's weeping willow. Weeping willow has probably been there 25, 30 years. Beautiful tree. Knocked it straight over. Broke off half of the root system. And they cut a lot of the dead stuff off. They pulled it back up, tied it off to another big tree. Now all of this will grow, and there's maybe only one or two major roots going down. The rest of them are gone. Have been completely disconnected.
It's a good question about a weeping willow that was knocked over in a storm, then got severely pruned, and trying to bring it back to life. Is it going to survive? Maybe. There's a good chance. We had last summer, just over there, we had a huge cottonwood tree, and it was about 50 years old, and it was starting to fail. The branches were falling. It was afraid it might fall in this building, injure customers. So we had a tree service come in, and they came in with a crane. I mean, it was a big weekend job, and they just took the whole tree out. But we had these stumps cut. Some of them are really wide. You may see them. The plants are, placed on there, and we have other trunks about this size. And you know what's happened on some of those trunks, those little chunks, whatever we call them? They put out some new growth. So they're not planted in the ground. There are no roots. They've been chopped off from the tree and placed over there in the middle of nowhere. And as we go around and clean up plants, we say, oh look, the cottonwood is not giving up at all. It's trying to come back to life. So it's hard to tell. I think only time will tell, but that gives you some idea that weeping willows are pretty hardy trees, and cottonwoods are as well. That's why they get to be so big. So there's a chance it might be able to come back.
What is the root system?
So I think we're going to wrap things up. We'll still be available to answer questions individually or help you take a look at trees, shrubs, anything that we have here. Any final questions before we do that? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming.